Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for Everkeep. This is the second trial made available by the MSQ in Final Fantasy XIV DAWNTRAIL. This encounter is a double-edged sword, since half of the souls are overflowing with love for Zoraija, while the other half would like to commit patricide on this daddy. Let me know which camp you're in the comments below. My name is BizTech and I'll be your trial guide. Soul Overflow will deal raid-wide damage and add a stacking damage up buff on the boss. Healers be ready with their shields and heals. Double-edged swords will telegraph a half-rune cleave on one side of the boss. Players will first move to the opposite side to avoid the first attack before quickly moving to the other side to avoid the second. Patricidal Peak will target the primary target with a heavy hitting tank buster. Cooldown and heal as necessary. During the next Soul Overflow cast, a number of adds will appear around the platform. The boss will then cast Calamity's Edge, destroying them and dealing high raid-wide damage. The area that these adds were in will soon explode in wide circle attacks, and players will need to move away from them to avoid getting hit. Vorpal Tail will form 4 line attacks on the edge of the platform. With each attack, these AoE lines will form closer and closer to the middle of the platform before expanding back out to the edge again. Since this whole process takes a bit of time, this mechanic will often overlap with other mechanics, and players will have to carefully dodge each attack as necessary. These mechanics will repeat until Zoraija casts Soul Overflow for the 4th time and a cutscene begins to play. Zoraija will transform and the next phase will begin. The boss will begin to cast Smiting Circuit and 2 blades will appear around him. If these blades are inside of his hitbox, players can expect a point-blank AoE attack and should stay outside of his hitbox to avoid getting hit. If the blades are outside of his hitbox, players can expect a room-wide donut attack and should instead move into his hitbox. Dawn of an Age will transform the arena into this tiny platform. 2 more inaccessible platforms will then appear. The boss will cast Volok and a number of blades will appear on the smaller squares on the platform. Players will need to move away from these areas. Bitter Reaping will target the first and second enmity targets with these heavy-hitting tank busters. Cooldown and heal as necessary. The next time the boss casts Volok, the swords will appear on the inaccessible platforms. The boss will then cast Sync, copying whatever pattern of attack going off on the outside platform onto the center platform. Move into the safe squares to avoid the incoming sword attacks based on what you see on the active outer platform. Gateway will cause a number of tiny portals to appear on the edges between platforms. Portals linked by a blue line are connected, and what goes into one will come out of its linked buddy. The boss will cast Blade Warp, spawning a number of swords on the outer platforms. Forge Track will activate the swords, and players will need to follow the path of the attacks through the portals to see how they'll affect the player platform. Once you figure that out, move into the available safe lanes to avoid getting hit. The boss will eventually cast Actualize, dealing high raid-wide damage and returning the arena to normal. Half Full will target half of the platform on the side of his glowing raised sword. Players will need to move to the opposite side to avoid getting hit. From this point on, each half circuit cast will also have an additional half full attack overlapping with it. Players will need to identify if it's a circle or donut attack and which side is safe before moving appropriately. Fire 3 will target all players with these circle markers. Move away from one another to avoid overlap. During the next Dawn of an Age mini phase, players will have to deal with attacks coming from multiple outer platforms at once, but the general idea remains the same. Identify how the portals will move the incoming line attacks and find yourself a safe lane to stand in. I like to do this one platform at a time so as not to get confused, but it'll get easier over time with practice. After a second round of swords and portals, a player will be marked with this lineup marker. The group will need to stand together to share the incoming damage of 4 consecutive raid-wide hits. The boss will cast Volok again, and swords will appear in a random formation on all 4 outer platforms. Next up, Bitter Reaping will target both tanks with heavy-hitting tank busters. Cooldown and heal through this damage as necessary. Immediately after, the boss will cast Sync, and players will have to identify the 2 active platforms and find the appropriate safe area based on the mirrored sword attacks from each platform. The final 2 outer platforms will then mirror their swords, and players will again need to find the safe spot. While this is all happening, the boss will also be casting Half Full, so make sure to reposition on the appropriate side of the boss immediately after the sword attacks resolve. There will be another Duty's Edge lineup marker to share before the boss casts Actualize, deals even more raid-wide damage, and returns the platform to normal. At this point, mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll check out the new expert dungeons. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.